Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, the book initiative that began when the pandemic began. And today is it's a special interview. I'm really excited. We're going to be talking about this wonderful book, Lady Parts, by Deborah Copaken, which is now out in paperback. And if you look in the comments section, everybody, I've made it so easy for you to go on and order it at your favorite indie bookstore. The link is right there. So you should order it and order all of her books because they're all equally fabulous. If you have any questions for Deborah, just pop it in the comments and I'll ask it probably in about 20 minutes or so. So first I want to introduce Deborah, then I want to introduce her book, and then we're going to talk and you all can listen in and make comments too. So let me go pull up the bio. Deborah Copaken is the New York Times bestselling author of 7 books, including Shutter Babe, The Red Book, Between Here and April, and Lady Parts, which is just incredible. It's a memoir of bodily destruction and resurrection. She's a contributing writer at The Atlantic. She was also a writer on the Emmy Golden Globe nominated Netflix hit Emily in Paris. She performs at the Moth. She's an Emmy award-winning news producer and photojournalist. Her photos have appeared in Time, Newsweek, the New York Times. Her writing has appeared in the New Yorker, the New York Times, the Guardian, Observer, the Wall Street Journal, and everywhere else. Her column, When Cupid is a Prying Journalist, was adapted for the Modern Love streaming series. She's also the writer, producer, CEO, and publisher of the Substack Lady Parts. And I want to encourage everybody to subscribe to this particular Substack because I do, and it's given me more important information about how to live in the world and how to be a woman in the world and medical information than anything else. Trust me on this. So, Lady Parts has been called a book about a woman trying to keep things together while her body is falling apart. The structure is just amazing. It's like from every different part you can imagine. And I want to repeat some of the raves. First, there's my rave, where I say everybody has to read this book. It's so completely extraordinary. It's so honest. It's so raw. It should be required reading for men and for women. But don't take my word for it. Andrew Sean Greer, Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times bestseller author of Less, says, eye-opening, breathtaking, terrifying, enraging, heartbreakingly funny. Read this book. Let's see. Rick Moody, who I also love, said Lady Parts is a first-rate example of the contemporary memoir. Harrowing, sad, funny, revelatory, true. Were you to misconstrue the title, you might think this was simply anatomy, which would be fine. But as with all the best memoirs, what this work really is about is how it feels. In the mind, in the soul, and in the nick of time, Copaken's memoir is poignant, necessary, and very rewarding. Welcome so much to be here, Deborah. I'm thrilled to have you on A Mighty Blaze.
Hi, Caroline. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, are you kidding? Anytime you want. So I want to talk about, because publishing is so weird, you wrote something saying this is the quietest paperback release ever. So I would like you to talk about it. And that is why I want to mention again, the sell link where you can buy Deborah's book. It's paperback. You can tuck it in a pocket. You should do it right now. So tell us, Deborah, about the quiet paperback release. And I'd also like, when you're done with that, I'd like you to segue into talking about how publishing is so very different these days, and often dishearteningly so.
Sure. Okay. So the paperback launch was supposed to be last week, October 24th. And so as we writers do, we often go into bookstores in our neighborhood the week before launch because they usually get their boxes like a few days before. So my plan last Saturday or 2 Saturdays ago was to go to all my bookstores, community bookstores, Books Are Magic, Greenlight, everything that's in my Brooklyn neighborhood. And I called around Saturday morning and nobody had it. And not even they didn't have it yet. They hadn't ordered it.
Oh my God.
That's so weird. I don't understand. And then I found one copy of the book at Barnes and Noble, and then I had a little like panic attack, like, what's happening? Why does nobody want this book? I thought it did well in hardback. Why wouldn't they order it? So my partner said, well, there's one book out there. We're going to go sign it. And I'm like, I'm not going to go sign one book. That's ridiculous. He goes, yes, we're going to go sign that one book. And it was raining. I didn't want to go out in the rain. Anyway, we went to the Barnes and Noble in Park Slope, and they were really nice. And I signed my one book and I held it up and took a photo, and they put it on their social media. And Emma Straub, who owns Books Are Magic, got in touch, and she said, they Random House accidentally left it out of the Edelweiss catalog sent to independent booksellers, and they just slipped it in on Friday. I'm not sure what happened. And to be fair, Penguin Random House has been really apologetic and kind and wonderful, but it also just means that nobody was talking about the books. The reps weren't talking about the books. The book wasn't, it just wasn't mentioned. So it's had to be a real grassroots effort. And I really appreciate you reaching out when you read that to help with this video here, because what I've been doing all week is literally creating an Excel spreadsheet with every name of every independent bookseller that I know of. And I'm trying to Wikipedia has a list of them, and you can just sort of Google independent book. There's no list. I just am creating one.
Right.
To find who the contact person is at each book. I sometimes even go on Instagram and I look up booksellers that way and have contacted a few that way. And I ordered book plates, and I'm sending everybody 10 book plates, one at a time, with my my little stamps and my little envelopes, handwritten, saying, hey, my book was left out of the catalog. Would you mind carrying it? So yeah, this is unprecedented. This is not what usually happens in publishing. This is one of those things. And I have learned after 57 years of living that stuff happens, and we are responsible for our reaction to that. And I could get angry and I could get upset, or I could just get to work.
Right.
And there's no changing what happened. There's only fixing what happened. And I'm trying to do it with as much humor and grace as I can, but it's a lot of work. I've been working on it all week. Just signing little, book plates and sending them off in the mail. But in terms of your second question, what is the difference between publishing back in 2000? Well, 2000 was, which is when I can't remember if Shutter Babe came out in 2000 or 2001.
I don't remember.
Anyway,
I should know, but anyway,
a century, whenever that was, what would happen when you published a book? And this is like in the early days of Amazon, the early days of the internet. There wasn't a lot of internet anything, right? I think I still shared an email address with my husband back then. Like, that's how long ago it was. So they would, Random House was my publisher back then, and they had a 12-city book tour plan, which means that you wake up one day, you fly to LA, you wake up the next morning, you fly to San Francisco. It's just like 5 a.m. flights.
Right.
To these places. You get to the new place in time to do morning news. Then you do radio. Then you do a book event and they did a spectacular job doing that. But local media is gone. So there's no point days in sending authors out for those. So really, everything has now been placed in the author's hands in terms of, are you going to do a book tour or not?
Right.
What does that book tour look like? Are you going to sort of galvanize your friends and get them to host a book party? They used to cover the cost, at least of the liquor, of a book party. That doesn't happen anymore. And also, let's talk about COVID. Lady Parts came out when the Delta wave was rising. So there was no book party. There were no events. There were no in-person events. We did a lot of Zoom events. And now the paperback came out, and I thought, well, at least I can do some things, but nobody was informed about the books. So thank you.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. I just want to say to anybody who's out there, if you have Substacks yourself, if you have blogs, if you know people at independent bookstores, if you are an independent bookseller, this is the time for everyone to rally in the writers community and really do things. It's a tremendously great book. I wouldn't have done this if I didn't think it was a tremendously great book. And, we all should work together and help to make this okay. So, I remember something that when Lady Part came out, there were rapturous reviews. And I have to ask, because there was one review where the reviewer was squeamish. And I thought, oh my God, this reviewer, it was pretty clear that this reviewer was scared by your openness and scared by your refusal to sugarcoat things. And also I had the feeling that it was disconcerting to have so much talk about, lady parts, about women's part, which I found both fascinating and disheartening. Why do you think that America has gotten so backwards in its treatment of women and so terrifying? It seems like I would have hoped that a book like Lady Parts, which was just so out there talking about breasts and cervix and vaginas and everything else you could possibly want to know and should know, that people would be a little more open to discussing these things. And instead, they've taken a step back. Did that surprise you, or did you think it was inevitable? Or
nothing surprises me about the patriarchy. But I did hope and think that, for example, a review in the New York Times wouldn't mention like, oh, it's, if those of you who are squeamish, feel free to skip the first chapter. Like, no, don't skip the first chapter.
No.
The first chapter is horrifying, and it happened. And had I known that this could happen, and I didn't, because we don't tell women anything about their bodies,
right,
I would have probably taken an ambulance rather than Uber pool to the emergency room, right? So what happened, just in a nutshell for anybody who hasn't read the book, is I had my cervix removed, which was 5 years after a hysterectomy. The cervix should have been removed during the hysterectomy. It wasn't, because, again, bad information back in 2012, where they thought that the cervix played a role in sexual pleasure. That has been debunked. So 5 years after a major hysterectomy, I had to get a second 8-hour surgery to remove my cervix. And 2 weeks after that, I went to the emergency room complaining of inner tugging. I said, something hurts inside. And they said, well, we don't have a speculum in the emergency room. That's best handled between you and your gynecologist in normal business hours. And I was like, you have a speculum in the emergency room?
I know.
Half of us have vaginas. What? Anyway, I went home with an antibiotic, which I didn't need. And a few days after that, I bled out from something called vaginal cuff dehiscence, which was essentially the stitches at the top of the vaginal canal came undone, and my innards were falling out of me.
Oh my God.
My daughter, who was 20 at the time, happened to be the only child at home. She had just flown home from a trip abroad, and she found me wandering the apartment at 1:30 in the morning with a glass Tupperware container into which I was placing these giant chunks of my own flesh that were falling out of me. And I was putting them back in because I was so lost from blood loss. I was so out of it that I thought those were my internal organs that I needed to save in the refrigerator. So I was putting them in the refrigerator so that I could go to sleep and wake up the next day and go to the hospital. And my daughter, thank God, was like, are you kidding me? We're not staying. You got to go to the house looked like The Exorcist. I mean, there's blood everywhere, all up and down the floor, on the kitchen floor, in my bed. It was like a crime scene. Anyway, yeah, it's gross. It's bloody, but it happened.
And it's real. It's real.
But it happened. And so if we're going to get squeamish about blood, I mean, we all bleed every week, right? Every month. Not me anymore, but, anyone under the age of 52 or so is bleeding every month. That's reality. We're getting to a point where we're more open about talking about periods. We're finally getting to the point where we're more open about talking about menopause. It's become big business menopause, but right. I want to talk about it just in terms of us. of what we experience as women in our post-reproductive years. And I read a statistic recently, 40% of all women at any given time are in menopause. That's almost half of us are dealing with
Right.
hot flashes and vaginal dryness and migraines and all these things that when you go to a doctor and you say, I have migraines like I did, and they say, well, let's put you in an MRI. Okay, great. But I think it's just menopause. I said, I think it's hormonal. And I was laughed at by the first doctor that I went to. He's like, yeah, no, that doesn't happen. And now we know it does, right? So it's just a matter of I wrote the book that I wanted to read because all this information that I was learning by default and because of horrific things that were happening to me, I thought, well, other people should know about this too. And it's also just about the silencing, not only of women's voices, but the silencing of our lives, of our experience, of our knowledge of our own bodies.
I agree. You made one comment. You said when you sent the book out for blurbs, the women all felt seen and the men were shocked. And
Yeah.
I thought, I was exhilarated when I first read the book because it seemed like there was a conversation about all this stuff. People were talking about all this stuff. And I also have to say, and again, I encourage everybody out there, subscribe to Deborah's Substack. Because that's where I'm getting a lot of my medical information about hearing. You had a great thing about your ears and hearing. I'm following everything you're writing about osteoporosis now. It's very calm and open. And also, I love it that as a woman, you stand up to your doctors. A lot of times there's still a lot of that pat on the head. And what do you mean? You're not a doctor. You can't understand this. I'm the doctor. It's just
self-advocacy. Yeah, self-advocacy in front of a medical professional is hard. We're not taught that we're allowed to do that. What I have found, with one exception, my primary care physician is Bertie Bregman. He's friggin' amazing. I love him.
Wait, what's his name? I need a new one.
Bertie Bregman, Bertie. Bregman is his last name, Bregman. He's got 4 offices, 3 in Manhattan, 1 in Brooklyn.
Okay, great.
He's amazing. So with the exception of one male primary care physician who I've had for years and I love dearly, all of my doctors are women. And when I have mistakenly gone to a male doctor, for example, a urologist I went to recently, he made me feel so small that I actually wrote to the woman who recommended him and said, never send people here again. Never send people to this man again.
Good. I'm glad.
And he had terrible, terrible advice. He said, oh, you have UTIs, go in a bleach bath. No, don't go in a bleach bath if you're a woman. The vagina has very sensitive tissue. That's for men. You can go in a bleach bath if you're a man. You can't go in the bleach bath if you're a woman. It's really bad for you. This is what a doctor was telling me.
But that seems like common knowledge. Why would you put bleach anywhere near there?
I kind of was sitting there like, this is after writing Lady Parts, after going through all this stuff, after self-advocating. To hear somebody say this to me, I kind of was like, my jaw was dropping and I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, we have to learn to stand up and leave doctors' offices more and more. You know what? You have a million questions up here. I wait until they. No. You don't have to do anything. I'm going to tell you the questions. Okay. I'm going to go through all of them.
I'm not wearing my glasses, so you got to do it.
From Robin Stull. So why is women's blood squeamish when blood and gore is so much a part of murder mysteries, action films, et cetera? Exactly. It's a good question.
Robin. I wish I knew the answer to that question, but what I guess I can say about that is we're okay with blood when it's about death and gore and war and all things violent, like boy stuff. But we are not okay with blood from the vagina. I mean, there's been decades, centuries of history of vagina dentata, the vagina
with teeth
alive, where, women were sent away when they had their periods to stay away from the tribe. I even had those strange experience once where my ex-father-in-law died, and he was an Orthodox Jew from Poland, but he was going to be buried in a German Jewish cemetery. And there was some sort of weird rule in the specific sect of Jews called the Moriah that women were not allowed to bury the dead. Like in Judaism, everybody gets to shovel some dirt onto the grave.
Right.
In this particular cemetery, women were not allowed near the gravesite, nor to shovel dirt on the grave, even though this was my father-in-law. Why? I kept asking why. And it's because the possibility that one of us would be menstruating and would,
God's sake.
and would, desiccate the grave in that way. And it was interesting because my daughter was like 11 at the time, prepubescent, and she's like, I don't even have my period. She like goes running over there and says, come on, everybody, and got the entire group of women to go over there anyway. Wow. And it was just the men were horrified, but she's like Joan of Arc,
Oh, I like your daughter. Katie Crutchfield-Westland asked you 2 questions. First, what did you learn about yourself after writing the book?
I guess I learned that for me, and I only say for me, I don't know what it's like for any other writer, I have always taken trauma and turned it into humor. It's the way that I deal with trauma. I try to make it funny. I try to turn it around so that I can talk about it as my own story. I mean, the way that Nora Ephron said, if you slip on a banana peel and other people laugh at you, then it's, what you want to do is tell your own story of the banana peel, right? I'm bastardizing what she said. I wish I could remember exactly what she said, but it's about owning your own shame and owning your own fuck ups. And I'm not allowed to say that online. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Owning what happened to you and making it your own story. So I'm kind of unable to process what I lived through until I write it down. Some people do this in journals. Some people do this in artwork. We all create out of what we've experienced, whether fiction, nonfiction. And for me, the act of writing nonfiction helps me place all that stuff on a shelf. I mean, literally on a shelf behind me. And then I don't have to think about it again.
We have another question from Katie. Are book reviews important to you? Oh, that's a loaded question.
They're very important to me. Not getting a book review means that the book doesn't get noticed. So book reviews, the existence of book reviews is very helpful to readers, helpful to help them sort things out. What's really unhelpful is a terrible review. And so, it's like, would you rather have no review or a terrible review? I think I'd rather have no review than a terrible
review. But a terrible review, sometimes when a review is so awful, it's obvious that the critic has a bone to pick, or you just feel sorry for the author, or at least I do. I always go right out and get the book anyway. I mean, it still gets attention, especially if, like, in the times if somebody writes a letter afterwards saying, I really didn't like this review of this book by this reviewer. He's generally known to be this way, and blah, blah, blah. I think that's helpful too. It starts up a discourse.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, obviously, when you put something out there, you're going to get lovers and haters and in between, right? And that's the, that's just what we do when we write. We know. But I also think that there are some reviews that come from a place of jealousy, or that come from a place of wanting to tear somebody down.
Yeah, that's never good.
And I have found, unfortunately, that it's more women than men who write cruel reviews.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's terrible.
I wish that weren't so. I mean, going back, let's go back to Shutter Babe, for example. Like, one writer who sort of did a profile of me back then said, I asked her if she's worried that if her frankness will get her labeled a slut. And in the interview, I said, I really don't like that word. I hope you don't use it. And she used it in the review. And I thought, Well, that's an easy way of calling me a slut. It's just a sideways way of calling me a slut. And why are we doing this? I mean, it was 2000 when she interviewed me, so okay, but it's really not okay.
Right, right. You're right. You're right. Okay, we have another question from Katie, I believe. Yes. Are you currently working on any projects?
I am. I just finished. I've been taking on some freelance editing, and I'm not allowed to talk about the book that I was just working on, but it was by a doctor, and it was fascinating. And my job was to take this giant book that was written in doctor language and turn it into everyday language. I found that really edifying, really, really edifying. And that book will be coming out soon, I think, like in a year or so. But it
Oh,
was
great.
really fun to work on, and well paid, and I enjoyed that work a lot. So that I just finished. I've also started a new memoir, which
Great.
I'm not going to talk about, but just went out yesterday for its right of first refusal to Penguin Random House. So
Great.
we'll see how that goes. I have an idea for a screenplay that I am tinkering around with. And then I was supposed to, before the Writers Guild strike, I had a commission to write a screenplay that looks like it might have just fallen apart
Oh,
after all these months of strike. But who knows? We'll see. I mean, that could recombobulate after the actors' strike ends. But, the writer's strike was very difficult for some of us who count on health insurance and
right.
income from that source of revenue. So it's been a tough year. I also got in a car accident this summer, so like I lost 3 months to recovery.
I read that in your Substack, which is why people should subscribe to the Substack. The other big issue of the book and of life is that you had a huge fall from the security of being middle class,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that could happen to anybody. And it's really terrifying. Can you talk about that? And are there things that everybody should try to do to ensure that won't happen? Or is there just no way you can know whether it'll happen or not?
I mean, I'm about to talk to Alyssa Court, who's a writer. She had just published a book of essays from women writers, or I don't know if it's all women. It's writers who are on the edge financially, and
Oh, great.
yeah, and I wish I could remember what it's called. It's I've started reading it. It's really good. I'll let you know, and we can
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. That's something I'd like to read.
But I will say that there was a moment when I was at a farmer's market and I was waiting for 3 freelance checks to come in, as we often do when we're freelance writers. I mean, I'm still waiting for money that I earned in August right now. Like it's November and I'm waiting for freelance income that I earned in August. So this was back in 2014, I believe, and I was at a farmer's market and I was weighing a bag of apples, and I realized the apples were going to cost $6, and I thought, okay, no big deal. I looked at my Citibank app on my phone, and I had $18 in my.
Oh, God.
And I put the apples back, and I walked home without them. And it was the nadir. It was really, really low point. But there have been some changes since then, and I think we should acknowledge those changes, which is I used to have to spend $2,400 a month on health insurance. That
Yeah.
is backbreaking. That is backbreaking. I was a
Yes.
solo mother of 3, and that was a backbreaking cost. Now I'm on Obamacare, and I think this year I spent $462 a month. So, not great, but not backbreaking,
Not
right? Not another
backbreaking.
rent
Yeah.
worth of cost. So that has been a huge change since I was living on the edge back then. But I am constantly, I feel like since the age of 18, just like constantly treading water. And it hasn't ever been comfortable. And even if I have the title New York Times bestselling author in front of me, that means nothing. There was a
It's
great
nothing.
interview with the author of Maid, Stephanie Land, her name is, right?
Yeah.
And it was an interview about, while you're a New York Times bestselling author and your books become a TV show, are you doing okay now? And she's like,
She said no.
no,
Yeah.
no.
I remember that. I remember that. Yeah, it's I have this conversation with so many of my writer friends because it's always maybe you have a good month, but what about next month? And what happens if someone gets really sick and your health insurance won't cover it?
Right.
I mean,
Because it
there's
happens to me
always
over and over and over again, you know?
it's a terrifying thing. So I think I remember that you told me that Lady Parts was going to be a TV series. Am I misremembering
Yes,
that?
it was going to be a TV series, and that also has fallen apart, as a lot of these deals fall apart, right?
Yeah,
You move on, the person that bought it is now gone. That happens to me all the time. My books get bought for TV or screen, and it looks like it's going to happen, and they're finding the actress, and then the whole deal falls apart. So, that's just part of the.
it's part of the process. I also want to talk about you found love again, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And I always like to tell the story of my mom, who hated men and romance from Lust for Life, had a terrible marriage, fell in love for the first time when she was 93, and it just lasted. And it's like it was the best romance ever. So I want to know, like, and I think everybody out there wants to know, how were you able to find love again? And were you just optimistic that you would, or was it just that you knew exactly what kind of person you wanted to be with now?
So I'll give a little bit of context. I was in a 20-year marriage, 23-year relationship, 20-year marriage with my husband, my ex-husband, and we have a perfectly good relationship now, which is nice. It's nice to like be able to get along for the sake of it.
Right.
But we could not stay together. It just was untenable. And, the book goes into why. After that, I had a 4-year cohabitation with a man I met on Bumble, who I happened to have met earlier in life. And I thought we were doing great. I thought everything was good. It turns out he was cheating on me, lying about the cheating, and an addict to boot. So it was just like the discovery of all this was devastating.
Of
And
course.
I discovered all of this in July of 2021. And it was right before I had to launch my book into the world and deal with a legal
Oh,
issue and get my daughter off to med school. And it was just a really, and the Delta wave, so no in-person events, all that stuff. It was just a really, really bad time. And I spent the year after that, year and a half after that, saying, I am not going to search for love right now. I am just going to fall in love with myself, be okay with myself, um, be grateful for who I am and what I have done and what and how I'm able to love myself. And if I don't find love again, that's okay. But I am open. I would tell friends, yeah, I am open to it if you know anyone, but I'd given up on the apps. I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't. And I was talking with Christina Baker Klein, who's a novelist who you might know.
I know Christina.
Yeah, who is fantastic. And we were having drinks one day, and she said, well, look, I know this one man who is married. I said, no way. I'm not dating a married man. She goes, no, listen, hear me out. Married, but his wife has early onset Alzheimer's.
Oh,
And yeah, and she's gotten very sick recently. And if nothing else, both of you are kind of lonely right now. And maybe you could go have dinner together or go to movies together. Because I know he likes to go to movies and he likes to go bike riding.
companionship at first, right?
Companionship, right? I could use, I was being the third wheel on a lot of my friends' dates, like I would go to my friend Tad and Amanda's house, or I'd go to my friend Stacy and David's, I'd be the third wheel at everybody's dinner. And it would be nice to have a male companion.
Right.
So this man likes to surf. I just started surfing in my 50s. So Christina said, why don't you guys like meet for surfing? And so Townsend, his name is, we were texting and he said, yeah, I'm going surfing tomorrow. Actually, why don't you come join us? And I said, well, where are you going surfing? Montauk. I was in Brooklyn. I thought, how am I going to get out to Montauk tomorrow? But, again, I was open to it. And I was open to the idea of new relationships, whatever that relationship looked like, because I had that primary relationship with myself. And there was a moment when I was driving out to Long Island at 5 in the morning when the sun was just coming up. And I thought to myself, what the hell am I doing? Like, this is crazy. Like, what the hell am I doing? And then the other part of me is like, no, if nothing else, you'll have a nice walk on the beach.
That's right.
The Montauk, how bad could it be?
That's right.
And I booked myself, it was end of September, so there were some cheap deals for hotels. And I booked myself into a lovely little hotel, and I was, going to have a nice time by myself. And we ended up talking all day. We met at 8 in the morning. The conversation went on until 11 o'clock. I went back to my hotel. He went to his house. I drove away from that, just thought, I have a friend. I have a new friend.
That's right. That's perfect.
And we were friends for a while. And then we, I guess it was 2 months later where we just sort of admitted feelings for each other. And can this work out? How could this work out? I'm married. You're married. It's like, I'm not married. He was married. He is married. But we have somehow made it work. And his wife, Bridget, is very much in our lives. Bridget's parents are very much in our lives. We're flying out there on to see Bridget's parents on Thursday. She can't go, but her father's sick. So the two of us are going to go and be with his mother-in-law. Our kids get along. It's unusual, and we know it's unusual, and it's
it
okay.
Works.
There is profound reciprocal love. And I said to him the other day, the story of the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years until they found Jerusalem. I have been wandering in the love desert before I met him for 40 years, literally from the age of 16 until the age of 56. And that's when I met him. And I'm now 57. And, all I can say is I'm so grateful to have found love at 57. It took a long time, but
doesn't matter.
I feel great.
Doesn't matter. My mom's last 7 years were the happiest of her life. It was such a gift. And I just insist on telling everybody, because that was a real, true love. And there was passion in it too. It was also physical in her 90s. So
yeah,
it can happen anytime, and it's a gift. Okay, so I want to say to everybody out there, do not forget, I put up a link so you can order Deborah's book. When you go into your local indie bookstores, you know what else you can do? Ask for the book. Ask for the book. Say you've heard all this stuff about it, ask for it, tell them to get it in. Tell them why it's not in the store. Go out and be a member of the writers community. That would be a really great thing to do.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, because what I have been doing is exactly that. Literally contacting either through Instagram or the indie booksellers' websites, contacting bookseller by bookseller saying, hey, this snafu happened. The book was omitted. Could you please, put it in?
Yep, absolutely do that. And thank you for those who asked questions, and thank you all for tuning in. And thank you so much, Deborah, for being here. Don't go away. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, but you stay. So goodbye to everybody, and I'll see you next week, I hope. And have a nice weekend.